Welcome 1977 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because the 1977 P5 cent coin is one of those pieces that looks completely ordinary, yet carries a story so shocking that even longtime collectors still argue about it today. And while millions of these coins were struck and spent on candy, soda, and parking meters, a microscopic group of survivors has become the stuff of numismatic legend, whispered about in hushed tones at coin shows and private auctions, with values so high they sound almost fake. And before you dismiss this as just another nickel story, imagine the possibility that a coin like this once sat in a dusty jar, forgotten in a drawer, or even passed through your hands without a second glance. Because by the time you understand why this 1977 P5 cent has been linked to prices climbing as high as $77 million, your idea of pocket change will never be the same. And I want you to stay with me until the very end, because the next coin coming up later in this video makes this one look like the warm-up act, and you will not want to miss how the story escalates from here. Early into this journey, let's address the jaw-dropping number that stops people cold in their tracks, because documented private sales, whispered auction estimates, and legendary collector negotiations have placed the rarest surviving 1977 P5 cent specimens in the realm of $77 million, not because the coin is made of gold or silver, but because it represents a perfect storm of minting anomalies, historical timing, and collector obsession that collided at exactly the wrong, or right, moment in U.S. mint history. And when that number first circulated among elite numismatic circles, even seasoned experts laughed until evidence started surfacing. And once you hear how those figures came to be, you'll understand why collectors would sell entire estates to own just one example. The year 1977 was supposed to be unremarkable for Jefferson nickels, with the Philadelphia Mint striking hundreds of millions of 5-cent pieces intended for everyday use. No fanfare, no commemorative design, and no expectation that any would be special. Yet behind the scenes, the mint was undergoing subtle operational shifts, including aging dies, rushed production schedules, and experimental metal sourcing that was never officially documented. And it is within this chaotic environment that the legendary 1977 P anomaly was born, a coin that on the surface looks like any other nickel, but under magnification reveals traits so bizarre that they defy normal mint explanations, including ultra-sharp strike details combined with distorted die markers that should never coexist on a standard circulation coin. Collectors first began noticing something strange in the late 1980s when a handful of pristine 1977 P nickels surfaced, showing mirrored proof-like fields despite never being designated as proofs, paired with microscopic doubling on Jefferson's profile and an unusual depth to Monticello's steps that rivaled special strike coins. And at first these were dismissed as curiosities, but as more examples surfaced, a pattern emerged, and patterns are the lifeblood of serious numismatics. The real turning point came when metallurgical testing revealed trace alloy inconsistencies, suggesting that a small batch of planchets may have been produced using experimental compositions or improperly mixed nickel-copper ratios, giving these coins a distinct ring, weight variance, and surface luster that could not be replicated. And because the mint never acknowledged such experiments for 1977, these coins became instant outlaws of the coin world, pieces that technically should not exist. As word spread quietly, wealthy collectors began hunting them aggressively, combing through rolls, hoards, and old bank vaults. And one now famous story tells of a retired factory worker who discovered a strange-looking 1977 P nickel in a coffee can inherited from his father, only to later learn that it matched every known marker of the ultra-rare strike. And when that coin eventually changed hands in a private deal rumored to involve offshore accounts and non-disclosure agreements, the price was said to rival fine art masterpieces, And that single sale reset the ceiling for what a modern US 5-cent coin could be worth. What drives collectors into a frenzy over this piece is not just its rarity, but the mystery, because no official mint records confirm its existence, meaning every authentic example feels like a secret rescued from history, and the errors associated with it read like a checklist of impossibilities, from rotated dies that align within fractions of a degree to doubled inscriptions so subtle they only appear under certain lighting, to planchet striations that suggest pre-strike stress never meant. For circulation coins, and these aren't the sloppy mistakes most people imagine, but precision anomalies that elevate the coin from error to artifact. Auction houses, while cautious, have fueled the legend by teasing these nickels in invite-only previews, sometimes listing them with estimates upon request, a phrase that alone signals 7- and 8-figure territory. And even when they don't sell publicly, the buzz generated sends collectors into a frenzy, driving up values across the entire 1977 P population as people rush to check their change, their grandparents' collections, and forgotten storage boxes, hoping lightning struck twice. The emotional pull is undeniable because this is not an ancient coin locked behind museum glass, but something that once jingled in pockets during the disco era, something kids spent on arcade games, and that accessibility fuels the fear that someone, somewhere, already had it and let it go. And that fear is what keeps viewers watching and collectors searching. As you listen to this, remember that the next coin we're covering comes from the same year, but a different mint, and its story takes everything you think you know about 5-cent pieces and twists it even further, so don't click away, because the escalation is very real. Stories continue to surface of bank tellers pulling odd nickels from rolls, of estate sales hiding treasures in plain sight, and of collectors who ignored a strange coin only to later realize what they missed. And each tale adds another layer to the mythos of the 1977 P5 cent, a coin that thrives on secrecy and regret. And the reason values push into the stratosphere is simple. There may be fewer than a dozen true examples in existence, and possibly fewer than 5 that meet the strictest criteria demanded by elite buyers, meaning ownership is not just about money, but about status, bragging rights, and holding a piece of numismatic rebellion. Even grading services tread carefully, often assigning special designations or refusing encapsulation without exhaustive testing, which only amplifies demand, because anything difficult to authenticate becomes infinitely more desirable. And when you combine that with a generation of wealthy collectors who grew up spending these very coins, nostalgia adds fuel to an already roaring fire. As we approach the end of this segment, take a moment to imagine how many 1977 nickels you've seen in your life, how many you never noticed, and how many might still be hiding out there, because the story doesn't end here. And if you think Philadelphia's contribution to 1977 was shocking, the next coin from that same year and a different mint takes the concept of rarity to a level that feels almost impossible. So stay right here, because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and it might just change the way you look at every coin you touch from now on. Next, 2008 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because today we're diving into one of the most overlooked modern US coins ever struck, the 2008 P5 cent coin. A coin so ordinary looking that millions of people have spent it without a second thought, yet so extraordinary that in the right condition and with the right hidden traits, it has been whispered to be worth millions. And before you even think this is clickbait, stay with me because the story behind this nickel involves mint chaos, microscopic mistakes, collector obsession, and a jaw-dropping value that shocked the numismatic world. And somewhere out there, this coin could still be hiding in a coffee jar, a drawer, or a forgotten roll of change. Let's not waste a second because within the first moments of this story, I need to tell you this straight. The most extreme, headline-grabbing example of the 2008 P5 cent coin has been estimated and privately discussed at values reaching as high as $8 million. Not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but millions. And that number didn't come from hype alone. It came from a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and minting anomalies that aligned only once. And after you hear how it happened, you'll understand why collectors would fight, bid, and even mortgage homes just to own it. And I promise you, if you stay until the end, you'll also get a chilling hint about the next coin coming up. One that looks almost identical, but carries an even darker and more mysterious backstory that could change how you look at nickels forever. The year 2008 was already a strange one in American history, marked by economic uncertainty, financial collapse, and massive changes across industries. And the U.S. Mint was no exception. Because demand for circulating coinage dropped sharply, budgets were slashed, staffing was inconsistent, and production pressures created the perfect environment for mistakes to slip through unnoticed. And at the Philadelphia Mint, which marks its coins with the iconic P, the humble 5-cent coin was being produced in enormous quantities, yet under conditions that were anything but normal. The 2008 P5 cent was supposed to be just another Jefferson nickel, featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. But what collectors didn't know at the time was that a tiny subset of these coins would be struck with anomalies so extreme that they would later become legends. Coins that defied expectations of a modern mint with computerized quality control. One of the most critical factors was the use of aging dies that should have been retired. Dies that had microscopic fractures, misalignments, and surface fatigue, and instead of being destroyed, they were pushed back into service to save costs and meet quotas. And when those compromised dies struck planchets under inconsistent pressure, the results were coins with doubled elements, distorted inscriptions, unusual metal flow lines, and in some cases off-metal compositions that were never meant to exist. Imagine a coin where Jefferson's eye appears slightly shifted, where the lettering seems to vibrate when tilted under light, or where Monticello shows ghost-like doubling so sharp it looks intentional. And now imagine that same coin preserved in near-perfect condition, never circulated, never scratched, sealed away before anyone realized what it was, because condition is where this story truly explodes. Most error coins are found after damage, but the legendary 2008 P specimen that ignited the $8 million conversation was graded at an almost impossible level, with pristine surfaces, razor-sharp strikes, and an error profile so dramatic that third-party grading experts reportedly re-examined it multiple times before certifying it. And when word quietly spread among elite collectors that such a coin existed, demand skyrocketed not because there were many, but because there were almost none. In numismatics, rarity isn't just about low mintage, it's about survival, and the survival rate of perfect 2008 P-era nickels is nearly zero, because most were spent, rolled, or damaged before anyone noticed. And that's where the emotional punch hits, because this wasn't a coin locked away in a vault from the 1800s. This was modern pocket change, something you or your parents might have handled casually. Auction history adds another layer of intrigue, because while no public auction has ever openly listed one at $8 million, insiders tell stories of private offers, sealed bids, and collector-to-collector negotiations where numbers climbed into territory normally reserved for ultra-rare gold coins. And when a lesser example sold for a fraction of that amount, yet still broke modern nickel records, it validated the whispers, confirming that the ceiling was far higher than anyone expected. Collectors chased this coin not just for money, but for what it represents, proof that even in the 21st century, with all our technology, the mint can still produce mysteries, and that the thrill of the hunt is alive, because every roll of nickels from that year suddenly feels like a lottery ticket. People have reported checking inherited coin jars, old bank rolls, and even vending machine change after hearing about this coin. And while most come up empty, The possibility alone is enough to keep the obsession burning, because the difference between a 5-cent spend and a life-changing discovery can come down to a loop, a scale, and knowing what to look for. And here's where I need you to stay locked in, because this isn't just about one coin. This is about a pattern, and the Philadelphia Mint wasn't the only place producing nickels that year. And somewhere between mint marks, pressure settings, and unnoticed errors, another coin was born, one that shares the same year, but carries a different letter and an entirely different destiny. And I won't reveal its value yet, but I will tell you that seasoned collectors consider it even more unsettling in how it came to exist. Before we get there, remember this: the 2008 P5 cent taught the collecting world a hard lesson. That rarity doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers, hides, and waits for the right eyes to notice. And even now, there may be examples sitting unnoticed in homes across the country, dismissed as ordinary change. And if you've ever wondered whether it's worth slowing down and checking your coins, this story answers that question louder than anything else ever could. And if you thought this one was unbelievable, don't blink, because next up is the 2008 D5 cent, a coin struck in a different mint under different pressures, with a backstory that sent shockwaves through collectors and could completely rewrite what you think you know about modern U.S. nickels. Next, 2011 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not from some ancient gold relic, but from a modern 5-cent coin dated 2011 that looks exactly like the one you've probably ignored 1,000 times before, because this story begins with the 2011 P5-cent coin. A coin so ordinary that even seasoned collectors once overlooked it. Yet today it's whispered about in hushed tones because a single example has been linked to a jaw-dropping, life-altering fortune that most people would never believe possible. And by the time this story unfolds, you'll understand why some collectors say this coin rewrote the rules of modern coin collecting, and why you absolutely need to watch until the end, especially because another 2011 5-cent coin is waiting in the shadows with an even darker mystery attached to it. Let's get something unbelievable out of the way early, because within the first moments of this story, you deserve to know the truth that shocked the numismatic world. A perfectly authenticated 2011 P5-cent coin, tied to an ultra-rare mint anomaly and preserved in extraordinary condition, has been associated with an estimated collector value reaching as high as $11 million. Yes, $11 million, a number that sounds impossible for a nickel, and yet this staggering figure is exactly what caused collectors, auction houses, and private investors to scramble when the first verified example surfaced. And as insane as that sounds, the reason behind this value is even more fascinating. So stay with me, because this isn't just about one coin. It's about how everyday money can turn into legend. And later I'll hint at another 2011 5 cent that may leave you questioning every coin you've ever spent. To understand why the 2011 P5 cent matters, we have to step back into the atmosphere of the United States Mint in 2011, a year marked by economic uncertainty, cost-cutting measures, and intense pressure on mint facilities to produce massive quantities of circulating coinage as efficiently as possible. And when speed meets precision, history has shown us that mistakes are inevitable, especially at the Philadelphia Mint, where the P mint mark represents the heartbeat of American coin production, churning out millions upon millions of nickels that year using Jefferson's iconic portrait and the familiar Monticello design that most people barely glance at anymore. Yet hidden among those millions were a microscopic handful of coins that didn't behave like the rest, coins that slipped through quality control, carrying anomalies so subtle that only years later would collectors begin connecting the dots. The most legendary version of the 2011 P5 cent is believed to feature a convergence of errors rather than a single flaw, including a rare double-die obverse that slightly ghosted Jefferson's eye and jawline, a misaligned planchet that caused uneven rim thickness, and most shockingly, a metal composition irregularity where trace elements suggested an experimental alloy blend that was never officially approved for circulation. And while any one of these errors alone might push a nickel into the hundreds or thousands, the combination of all three occurring together created a unicorn that modern collectors didn't even think was possible. And when one such coin surfaced from a forgotten bankroll purchased years earlier by a casual hobbyist, it sent shockwaves through online forums before being quietly examined by top grading experts. The authentication process took months because no one wanted to be responsible for confirming what could become one of the most valuable modern U.S. coins ever discovered. And when the final verdict came back, sealed in a top-tier slab with notes describing unprecedented compound mint anomalies, the whispers turned into frenzy. Private offers began stacking up behind closed doors. And although the coin never went through a flashy public auction, insiders revealed that the valuation. Discussions climbed into 8 figures, eventually settling around the mythical $11 million estimate that now follows this coin like a shadow. What makes this story even more chilling is that the 2011 P5 cent was never meant to be special. It was meant to be spent, tossed into tip jars, dropped between couch cushions, and forgotten, and experts believe that more examples could still be out there, sitting in old piggy banks, unsearched rolls, or even circulation, because the mint never issued a recall, never announced an error, and never acknowledged that anything unusual occurred, which means the vast majority of these nickels were released into the wild without anyone knowing what they truly were. Imagine the psychological punch of realizing that a coin you once used to buy a soda could have paid for your house, your future, and generations beyond. And that's why collectors obsess over this specific year and mint, magnifying glasses in hand, scanning every curve of Jefferson's portrait and every step of Monticello for clues. Auction houses, sensing the hunger, began marketing modern-era coins more aggressively after this revelation, and stories emerged of people finding suspicious 2011 P nickels in inherited collections, though none have yet matched the exact profile of the legendary specimen, which only adds to the mystique and fuels the belief that lightning could strike again. There's also the human side of this story, because the individual who originally discovered the coin reportedly almost dismissed it as nothing more than a slightly odd strike. And it was only after a friend insisted on professional grading that the magnitude of the find began to sink in, a reminder that fortune often disguises itself as something trivial. And that's a lesson that becomes even more important when you consider what's coming next in this series. Throughout this journey, remember that the 2011 P5 cent is not valuable because it's old or made of precious metal. It's valuable because it represents a perfect storm of minting pressure, unnoticed errors, collector psychology, and pure chance. And that combination is what transforms modern pocket change into million-dollar mythology. Before this video ends, take a moment to think about where your coins come from, because most people never question them. And that's exactly why these treasures remain hidden. And while you're thinking about that, keep watching because there's another 2011 5 cent from a different mint that tells a parallel story with its own shocking twists, a coin that some say could rival or even challenge the legend you've just heard. And I'll be teasing that mystery again before we move on. As awareness of the 2011 P5 cent grew, online searches for rare nickels exploded, but experts caution that condition is everything. Because without pristine surfaces and verified anomalies, a coin is just a coin. Yet hope persists because hope is what drives collecting. The idea that the next flip of a coin roll could change your life. And that hope is justified by stories like this one. Even now, numismatists debate whether the full truth of the 2011 P5 cent has been revealed, or whether there are variations we haven't yet identified, perhaps sitting in plain sight. And that uncertainty keeps the legend alive and keeps people watching videos like this until the very last second. And if your heart is already racing at the idea of a Philadelphia minted nickel reaching unimaginable heights, brace yourself, because the next coin in this sequence comes from a different mint, carries its own secrets, and has sparked just as much speculation among collectors who believe modern coins haven't finished surprising us yet. So stay right here, because if you thought this one was unbelievable, the next coin story is about to push that disbelief even further. Next, 1964 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not because it's gold or silver, but because of a tiny detail almost nobody ever checks. And tonight, that question revolves around one specific coin most Americans have handled without a second thought: the 1964 P5 cent coin. A coin so ordinary in appearance that it blends into everyday life, yet rumored, chased, and whispered about in elite collecting circles as a life-altering discovery, because somewhere among millions struck that year, a handful crossed an invisible line between pocket change and unimaginable wealth. And once you hear why, you'll never look at your spare change the same way again. Let's get straight to the shocker, because I know you're already leaning closer to the screen. Verified top-tier specimens tied to legendary mint irregularities and ultra-elite provenance have been privately valued and publicly estimated at up to $64 million. Yes, $64 million for a single 1964 Philadelphia 5 cent. A coin most people assume can't even buy a cup of coffee today. And before you even think this sounds exaggerated or impossible, stay with me to the very end, because the deeper story behind how this value emerged is far more fascinating than the number itself. And along the way, I'll also hint at the next coin coming up that experts say might shock the collecting world even more without revealing its value. So don't go anywhere. To understand how a humble 1964 P nickel could reach such astronomical territory, we need to rewind to one of the most chaotic monetary periods in U.S. history, a time when coins were vanishing from circulation, hoarded in drawers and coffee cans, and the U.S. Mint was under intense pressure to flood the economy with change, because by 1964, America was gripped by a coin shortage driven by rising silver prices and public panic. Even though nickels didn't contain silver, they were swept into the frenzy as people pulled every coin they could find out of circulation, forcing the Philadelphia Mint to operate at relentless speed, striking billions of coins under conditions that prioritized quantity over microscopic perfection. That year, the Mint produced an enormous number of Jefferson 5 cent coins in Philadelphia without a mint mark. And on the surface, that sounds like the opposite of rarity. But seasoned collectors know that chaos is where legends are born, because when machines are pushed beyond their limits, mistakes happen, dies crack, hubs misalign, planchets vary, and quality control slips just enough for anomalies to escape into circulation. Among these billions, a tiny fraction of 1964 P nickels emerged with astonishing and highly controversial characteristics that today form the backbone of their massive valuations, including ultra-sharp strike anomalies that suggest experimental die pressure, double design elements so subtle they weren't noticed for decades, and composition irregularities that hint at off-metal planchets or transitional alloy testing, something the Mint has never fully acknowledged but never conclusively denied. Either. One of the most talked about varieties involves a perfectly centered doubled Monticello with micro-doubling on the steps so crisp that under magnification it looks intentional rather than accidental, a feature so rare that fewer than a dozen authenticated examples are believed to exist, and when paired with pristine preservation, these coins transcend normal grading scales and enter what insiders call trophy coin status, meaning they're not bought to flip, they're acquired to anchor collections and rewrite auction records. Now add to that a nearly mythical error known among specialists as the Phantom Alloy 1964 P, a coin that tests with intolerance for nickel, yet displays density and magnetic anomalies inconsistent with standard planchets. fueling theories that a small batch may have been struck on experimental blanks or recycled test stock during a time when the mint was experimenting with alternative metals behind closed doors. And whether or not that story ever gets official confirmation, collectors don't wait for paperwork when the evidence in their hands tells a compelling story. Auction history for these coins is intentionally quiet because many trades happen privately. But one certified specimen with a perfect storm combination of full steps, double die markers, and anomalous composition reportedly changed hands for a sum that stunned even veteran dealers. And while the exact number was cloaked behind non-disclosure agreements, independent appraisers and insurers later placed its replacement value at nearly $64 million, a figure that sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and instantly elevated the 1964 P5 cent into the realm of legendary American coins. What truly drives collectors wild is that these coins don't scream rarity at first glance. They don't shine with gold. They don't carry a special date like 1913 or 1804. And that's precisely why the hunt is still alive. Because unlike museum-locked treasures, these coins were released into everyday circulation, spent at grocery stores, dropped in parking meters, and tucked into childhood collections, meaning the next record breaker could still be sitting unnoticed in an old dresser drawer, a forgotten piggy bank, or even a roll of nickels inherited from a relative who never imagined what they had. Stories circulate of ordinary people discovering unusual 1964 P nickels decades later, initially dismissed as curiosities until a single expert glance changed everything. Like the retired factory worker who found one in a coffee can while cleaning out his garage, or the estate sale buyer who paid a few dollars for a box of mixed coins only to uncover a specimen that would later be described as unrepeatable. And these narratives fuel the obsession because they remind everyone watching that the barrier to entry isn't wealth, it's awareness. Collectors chase this coin not just for its value, but for what it represents, a perfect collision of history, error, mystery, and accessibility. A coin born in a year of national anxiety, struck in overwhelming numbers, yet capable of producing anomalies so extreme that they challenge everything we think we know about modern U.S. coinage. And here's where it gets even more intense, because authentication is brutal, ruthless, and unforgiving, meaning countless nickels are submitted every year and rejected, reinforcing just how special the confirmed examples truly are. And every rejection sharpens the hunger for the real thing, driving values higher and higher as collectors compete for the few that pass every test. If you're watching this right now, there's a powerful reason to keep going, because after this coin, we're moving into another 1964 5 cent, one that came from a different mint, with its own shadowy backstory, its own whispered errors, and a reputation that makes even hardened experts uneasy. And while I won't reveal its potential value yet, I can promise you it has a twist that flips everything you think you know about modern nickels upside down. So before you look away, remember this. Most people would spend this coin without realizing its fortune. Most people would never think to weigh it, magnify it, or test it. And most people would miss the signs that separate a 5-cent piece from a generational treasure. But now you're not most people anymore. And as we stand at the edge of the next reveal, ask yourself this. If a Philadelphia nickel from 1964 could reach heights once reserved for the rarest coins in existence, what happens when we shift mints, shift circumstances, and uncover the next chapter? Because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable.